My husband of 5 years suddenly filed for divorce without any explanation. But I overheard a shocking conversation with his friend that revealed everything. My husband, 32, and I, 30, had been married for 5 years. We dated for about 2 years before that, and I was completely in love with him. So, when he proposed, I didn't hesitate for a second to say yes. At that time, my husband was an actor struggling to find work, while I worked as a surgeon. I ended up covering most of our household expenses, which didn't bother me at all. I wanted him to chase his dreams, and I was more than happy to handle the bills. He barely earned half of what I did, and was often cast as an extra in most scenes. But he never gave up. Recently, he landed a minor role in a feature film, and I was ecstatic for him. He had about 10 to 15 minutes of screen time, but even that was a huge achievement for him, and I was thrilled. This all happened a couple of months ago, and they were supposed to start shooting in a few weeks. But then everything changed. 5 days ago, my husband served me with divorce papers. I was completely blindsided. I never imagined he would ask for a divorce. He seemed happy with me and I with him, so this was a huge shock. He told me that he didn't feel the same way about me anymore and wanted to focus more on his career now that he was finally getting serious offers. He said it was just the beginning for him and that he needed a fresh start, free from the baggage of his past, which apparently included me. I couldn't believe he was saying all this, especially after everything I had done for us, all the sacrifices I made, and how I always put his dreams ahead of my own. I think I must have cried for hours that day and literally begged him to give our marriage another chance, but he was firm. He said there was nothing I could do to fix things, and that he no longer had any feelings for me. He told me it would be best for us to separate. Then he packed his things and left, leaving me heartbroken. That was 5 days ago, and for the next 4 days, I was completely lost. I didn't even go to work. That's how depressed I was. I just kept hoping this was all some horrible nightmare. Then yesterday, I received a call from my husband. He asked if I could drop off some of his formal clothes at his friend's house where he's staying, since he had a meeting the next day. I agreed, hoping that seeing him in person might give me a chance to convince him to come back. I guess I was feeling pretty desperate, so I did what I had to. I headed over to his friend's place. When I arrived, I realized the door was open and I could hear my husband and his friend talking inside. I was about to knock, but then I overheard his friend ask him why he had even married me if he never planned on staying with me. That caught my attention, and I decided to remain silent so I could listen in on their conversation and get some answers. It seemed like they had already been talking about me, and I happened to walk in on them at the perfect, or maybe wrong, moment. Before answering, my husband laughed and then went on to say that the only reason he married me was to use me to advance his career. He claimed there was no love for me in his heart. Over the years, he admitted to cheating on me multiple times with various women he met on set or at parties. I almost gasped, but I managed to control myself because I wanted to hear more. He continued and explained how he met me through a friend who told him I was the daughter of a well-known dental surgeon, which was true. My father is one of the best dentists in the state. My husband also knew that a popular actor was one of my dad's frequent clients, as he had heard it from a few of his friends. As the conversation continued, everything started to fall into place for me. He went on to say that he asked me out as a last-ditch effort to make his acting career work, and the fact that I was wealthy and easy to manipulate was just a bonus. So, for 5 years, he pretended to love me while waiting for an opportunity to meet my dad's famous client. The chance finally came at my dad's 50th wedding anniversary party about 5 months ago when he invited a lot of his friends, including his most popular client, who also happened to be a close friend of his. I had no idea, but my husband managed to speak to this actor at the party, charm him, and exchange numbers. My dad's client had only been there for half an hour because he was busy, but even in that short time, my husband managed to get his number. As much as I hate him now, I have to admit that my husband is very charming when he wants to be. I wasn't surprised that he pulled it off, But the fact that he wasted 5 years of not only his life but mine, putting me through unimaginable heartbreak, was something I couldn't handle. I was the reason he even secured that role in the first place, as the director of the film signed him based on a recommendation from my dad's client. This success was all because of me, yet I'm the one who's been betrayed and is now expected to go through a divorce. The urge to storm in and punch him in the face was overwhelming, but I kept my composure, returned to my car, and drove home. This happened yesterday afternoon, giving me plenty of time to simmer with anger and devise a plan to get back at this self-centered monster. At home, I attempted to meditate to calm myself, fearing that if I didn't regain control of my emotions, I might hurt him physically. I did everything I could to distract myself and strategize my revenge. Otherwise, my only thought was to ask my dad for the actor's phone number, call him, and demand my husband's removal from the film. However, I wasn't sure that would work, as this was a professional matter, and I wasn't sure they'd care about my opinion. My dad's client had known me since I was in college, and while we weren't particularly close, he knew me better than he knew my husband. Eventually, I figured it was worth a shot, so I called him in the evening after speaking with my dad. I hadn't shared the news of the divorce with anyone, not even my family, because I still hoped I could turn things around. This was the first time I was about to acknowledge the divorce, and I was extremely nervous. After a few calls and awkward small talk, his assistant finally put me through. Without hesitation, I blurted out what I needed and didn't stop until I had said everything. I explained how my husband had been unfaithful and used me and my dad's connections to land a role. I told him that if there was any justice, he should use his influence to have my husband fired from the film. I rushed through everything in one breath, probably making him just as uncomfortable as I was. There was a brief silence before he assured me he'd look into it and hung up after I thanked him. Naturally, I felt embarrassed by the whole situation, but it was done. Now, I could only wait to hear back from him or my husband. About 2 hours later, around 10 p.m., I received several frantic calls from my husband, which made me realize he must have already been fired. I couldn't believe it. I sent a thank you message to the man who made it happen. There hadn't been any formal contract, just a verbal agreement, so it wasn't a huge burden on him. He replied, wishing me luck for the future, which was incredibly kind and helped restore my faith in humanity. I ignored my husband's calls and texts, turned off my phone, and went to sleep without a care. I honestly think it was the best sleep I've ever had. But the next morning, a few hours after I woke up and was about to leave for work, I heard my husband yelling from outside, begging me to open the door. I had no intention of letting him in and told him I needed to leave for work. He wasn't ready to give up, repeatedly asking to speak with me one last time before I cut him out of my life completely. Eventually, I got tired of hearing him and let him in, telling him not to waste any more of my time. He immediately fell to his knees, begging me to give him another chance, saying that I was the only woman he had ever loved. But now that I knew how skilled an actor he was, I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. I let him cry for a few minutes before sarcastically asking how things were going with his new film role. I made sure my tone was mocking because, let's face it, that's exactly what I was doing. He seemed taken aback for a moment before standing up, realizing the gravity of the situation. Once he realized I had been the one behind him losing the role of a lifetime, he lost it, yelling in my face that I had ruined his life and that I would pay for it. I didn't hold back either, yelling back that he had ruined 5 years of my life, and he deserved this and even more. We screamed at each other for a good 5 minutes, but then he seemed to break down, realizing that no amount of yelling would bring back what he had lost, not the role, not the life he'd been living with me, and it was all his fault. I almost felt pity for him, but then through his tears, he threatened that he would take everything from me in the divorce and make sure I ended up homeless. That was the final straw. Any remaining sympathy I had vanished. I calmly told him to get out of my house, and he complied, still sobbing, but muttering curses under his breath. I decided to skip work that day since everything was so emotionally draining, and I wasn't in the right state of mind. AITA for destroying my husband's career right before it took off because he had been using me for years and had been unfaithful? Update 1. I finally told my friends and family about the divorce, and they were just as shocked as I had been when my husband first revealed what he wanted. When I told them about what I had overheard at his friend's house, they were appalled. They agreed that what I did in retaliation was nothing compared to what he had done to me. My dad was furious that his son-in-law had used both me and him to get ahead. He wanted to confront him physically, but I managed to calm him down. I'm relieved that most people agree with what I did because his actions were beyond cruel. He shattered my trust in both men and marriage, so I believe he deserved to lose his career. If he had spent years building his career, I had spent years and plenty of money on our marriage. If he could destroy our marriage, then me ruining his career shouldn't be such a big deal to him. But for whatever reason, he feels he was robbed of an opportunity because of me and has been harassing me online, begging me to help him get the role back. I keep blocking his accounts, but he's desperate enough to keep creating new ones. I'm seriously considering leaving social media entirely. I don't understand why he feels entitled to contact me after what he did, but eventually, he'll realize that he's done, and there's no going back from this. Whatever he said about ruining me in the divorce was just empty words, because both of us know he can't actually do anything to harm me. Update 2. I blocked my husband on social media and deactivated my account a few days ago, but now I think I have to change my phone number because I've been getting around 70 to 80 spam calls from different numbers, and it's driving me crazy. Every few minutes, my phone buzzes with a new call. I'm certain it's him behind this, but when I called him to make him stop, he denied it. I could tell he was lying, and it was even more frustrating. Towards the end of the conversation, he implied that the calls would stop only if he got his role back. I couldn't take it anymore and yelled at him, cursing him out through the phone before hanging up. I still haven't turned it back on, and right now, I'm using my laptop to access the internet. I'll only reactivate it after I get a new number, and hopefully by then, he won't be able to drive me crazy because he won't be able to reach me. As for the divorce, I believe everyone knows by now that I won't contest it, and we're scheduled to appear in court in a few days. I don't understand why he's behaving this way when we're supposed to see each other in court shortly, and he knows perfectly well that I could make things difficult for him if I chose to. Thankfully for him, I don't actually want to. I've done what I had to, and now I just want to let this whole situation go quietly and without any further conflict. I don't think holding on to this anger and allowing his existence to bother me will ever help me truly move on from this chapter. So, I just want to be finished now. I don't care what happens to him, whether he succeeds or fails in the future. It doesn't matter to me. I want nothing to do with him anymore. So, the day after tomorrow, my husband and I are supposed to appear in court, and of course, he couldn't just let that happen without doing something outrageous and crazy. I changed my number so he couldn't contact me anymore, and since I also deactivated my social media accounts, I was confident I'd won this time, and he'd have to back off. But I guess I underestimated just how insane he truly is. Last night, as I was heading home and about to get into my car, my husband suddenly appeared out of nowhere and climbed into the seat next to me. Then, he locked the doors from the inside before I even had a chance to react. As soon as I realized what was happening, I grabbed my purse to reach for my pepper spray, but I was too slow. He took it from me and tossed my purse to the back seat. I was terrified and ready to apologize or do whatever he demanded. In that moment, he spoke to me in an eerily calm tone, which made me even more uneasy. He said he didn't want much, just that I call my dad's actor client, retract what I'd said, and make sure he got the role. That seemed simple enough, but my phone was in my purse, so I told him I needed it to make the call. Now, I'm not naive, but my husband sure is. As soon as he handed me the purse, I grabbed my pepper spray and think I emptied half of it in one go. I could barely see anything because my eyes were burning so badly, but his condition was worse. He was gasping for breath after being sprayed. I unlocked the doors, shoved him out of the car, and drove off, leaving him coughing on the ground. I managed to get a few yards away from my workplace before I had to stop because I couldn't see well enough to drive safely. Thankfully, a cab pulled up, and the driver seemed to notice something was off. He kindly offered to take me to the nearest police station, and I accepted without hesitation. The next couple of hours were a blur, honestly, because I was still shaken up from the parking lot incident. I knew my husband was unstable, but this was beyond what I had expected. I could hardly believe I had been happily married to this man for 5 years, and now he was the one putting me through this madness. Fortunately, he was arrested since he couldn't get away from the parking lot due to his condition. When they brought him in, his face was still red and swollen, and I was relieved that he was suffering a bit. Once I pressed charges, I left. But instead of returning home, I went to my parents' house. Honestly, I just didn't feel safe on my own anymore and haven't left their house since. My parents have been incredibly kind, looking after me as if I were their little girl again, and that's been a small comfort. My dad has promised to ensure that this man faces the consequences he deserves, and I'm fully supporting him. Some men need to learn that they can't just mistreat women and get away with it. Update 4. Hey! It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I'm happy to report that my husband was sentenced to 3 months in prison and a substantial fine for what he did to me. I wish the punishment had been harsher, but this feels fair. As for the divorce, we managed to expedite the process, and it will be finalized much sooner than usual given the circumstances. He's not entitled to any compensation either, so that's another win for me. I sold the house and even my car, ensuring there's no way he can track me down again. I also started working at a new hospital that's much closer to my parents' place, making it easier for me to commute. Yes, I'm still living with them, as they absolutely refuse to let me live alone again, even though my husband can't reach me anymore, at least not for now. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved that they're keeping me close because I'm still processing the shock of everything. I've begun therapy to help me cope, but I know healing will take time, and I can't expect everything to return to normal overnight. Despite my efforts to push him from my mind, I still find myself reflecting on the years we spent together. It's hard to believe that it was all a lie, even though parts of it did feel real. Whenever I think of him, I force myself to remember what happened afterward, particularly the incident in the parking lot, and that helps me stay grounded. I know these wounds won't heal quickly, but I'm taking it one day at a time, and hopefully I'll be okay soon. I can't wait for that day.